Around the time MK11 released, a certain individual went into the game files of the Switch version and found that they were unencrypted and contained data for all the fighter intros, including the DLC characters. A lot of people have asked for my thoughts on the leak, but I didn't feel right talking about it without confirmation that it's accurate. But a friend of mine, who apparently is said leaker, asked me to personally make a video about Sindel specifically, since they know how big a fan of the character I am. And with the Shang Tsung trailer and the official bio sent out by Warner Bros. Both lining up with the leak, it seems more and more likely that the leak is accurate, so this needs to be addressed before NetherRealm makes a gigantic mistake that cannot be undone. Before we begin, you need to understand the context of what exactly NetherRealm is doing here. The best way to do that would be to rewatch the Sindel Wasted Potential, but in case you don't have the time, I'll quickly summarise. Sindel was the Queen of Edenia at the time of Shao Kahn's conquest. He killed King Jerrod and took Sindel as his wife. She committed suicide to escape him, but her soul was kept by Khan until he needed it for his scheme in MK3. He had Shang Tsung revive and brainwash her to justify his invasion of Earthrealm. She was then freed from his control and enjoyed a couple of heroic appearances before the new timeline began. Here, Sindel's death was not a selfish suicide, but a noble act of sacrifice to protect Earthrealm from Khan. Quan Chi then resurrected and brainwashed her. She died while brainwashed and became one of Quan Chi's undead revenants. She remained corrupted and evil throughout MKX before disappearing without explanation in MK11. Now, without a story appearance, Sindel's entire character here will be represented by her intros with the other characters and her arcade ending. Well, that and the official bio sent out by Warner Bros. So let's look at that, shall we? The former Queen of Edenia, and will stop at nothing to keep her place. I feel like that and shouldn't be there, but let's move on. Threatened with the loss of her throne when Shao Kahn conquered her realm, Sindel betrayed her husband and her people to keep her privileged position. Now, as Shao Kahn's wife and Queen of Outworld, she enjoys power and wealth beyond most people's imagination. So you can see the problem already, right? The current timeline has had Sindel go from master to master, mind controlled into villainy the entire time. As a result, many fans who came into the series during this era of the franchise had no idea Sindel was actually supposed to be a good guy. Their only experience with her was as a villain, which is depressing for a fan of the true version of the character. And now MK11 comes along and claims that Sindel is not a tragic innocent whose life was destroyed, driving her to suicide and further suffering before trying to redeem herself for her past misdeeds, nor is she a heroic soul who made the ultimate sacrifice for the sake of others, who was then turned into a weapon for the forces of darkness with a fate mirroring that of her daughter. Instead, she's a gold-digging, duplicitous layabout who will assist in the murder of her own husband if it means she can maintain her life of comfort. Numerous intros serve to deepen the depths of Sindel's depravity by exposing her as viewing her subjects as nothing more than playthings, a keeper of slaves for either labour or pleasure, pro-genocide, apparently racist, and so much of a slut that she'll hit on just about any man, including Kano. We also learn that Sindel's suicide was actually a cover-up for Quan Chi murdering her, which, in addition to being another example of NetherRealm retconning their own retcons, implies that Quan Chi had the invasion plan lined up 10,000 years ahead of time, which takes NetherRealm's obsession with Quan Chi as the ultimate manipulator to heights even I didn't think was possible. And her interactions with Kitana, you know, her daughter, present her as having no remorse for helping to murder the father of her child, betraying her people, and now placing Khan above Kitana on her list of priorities despite not even loving him. MK 2011, as bad as I felt that handled her, only weakened her character arc by romanticising her suicidal motives, thereby making her path to redemption much shorter. But this ruins Sindel as a character. This character is nothing like Sindel. There is nothing interesting or nuanced about this irredeemable bitch, and there will be many fans who came into the series with MK11 or who may not have paid close attention to the details of the game from 8 years ago, to whom this will be their mental image of Sindel, possibly forever. They will believe that Sindel is this awful of a character and will never give her the chance she deserves. This will be her legacy, and I honestly don't think she could ever come back from this stain on her reputation. I'm sure there'll be those who try to excuse this horrendous bout of character assassination by saying that it's just a non-canon DLC character because being non-canon automatically justifies out-of-character behaviour, right? Whether you're a fan of her or not, why would anyone want a non-canon version of the character to be added in place of one that accurately reflects her history? Who benefits from such an inclusion? Some will say it's an alternate timeline version. The story is only about 2 points in one timeline converging, meaning Sindel's history has to line up with that laid out by by 2011. Only mirror matches suggest weird alternate realities. Or they'll say that story and characterization don't matter. But a lot of fans got into the series during the 3D era, which many of the diehards would have you believe were irredeemably bad. So those fans must have gotten invested in the characters and story if that is indeed the case, yes? Let me ask you this, what reason is most likely to motivate a person to purchase the DLC fighters other than a desire to have the full roster? I'm sure some people will just want to try out a new moveset, but those people aren't hyped for Sindel, Nightwolf or Spawn. People weren't angry about Shang Tsung, Sector or Cyrax not being on the base roster, or Sindel and others being NPCs in MKX because they wanted to use their special moves. The people who are hyped are people who want to have the characters back, not their functions. And no, you can't say they know what they're in for from past games. Even without Shang Tsung being completely overhauled this time, MK is one of the least consistent fighting franchises in terms of gameplay. While you can play as Keelik in Soul Calibur 2 and still have a good enough idea of how he plays in 6 to pick him up and play, that's not really been the case in MK since the 2D era. People aren't excited to have Sindel's moveset from 2011 back, nor are they excited for her wacky revamp. They're excited for Sindel the character. That's what sells DLC. So even if purely from a cynical business perspective, maintaining the character's core personality and history is just as important as making sure they play like they should when bringing them back. And this doesn't just apply to post-launch content. Erron Black went from a real cowboy with an extended lifespan to some arsehole from Texas. Scarlet went from a flesh pit's homunculus to a street urchin Shao Kahn randomly taught blood magic to. And Cabal went from a black dragon that sought redemption in the NYPD to a crooked cop that was bought off by Kano. Poor continuity is one of the biggest roadblocks for new fans coming in. How is a person supposed to get invested in a setting and those that inhabit it when any elements, big or small, can randomly change on a whim? What if you really like Erron Black because you thought his backstory was cool? Or if you suddenly found yourself really invested in Cabal for his newly introduced struggle with his criminal past, and then MK11 comes along and changes those things? It's disheartening, right, when something you enjoy loses what it was that made you enjoy it in the first place. I'm sure most of you watching have experienced this in at least one fandom you're a part of, like Star Wars, Silent Hill, Resident Evil or Devil May Cry. That, in summary, is what the writers at NetherRealm are doing to these characters. Whichever version of Sindel's history you may have found yourself drawn to is now replaced by a totally different character masquerading in the Queen's skin. I'm willing to write some of this off as simple ignorance on the part of the current writing staff, the warped view of Sindel coming from her total lack of heroic screen time in the current timeline. The lack of basic research on even a wiki is disheartening, but I'm choosing to assume they aren't intentionally trying to ruin Sindel and believe that it comes from a place of innocent ignorance. Now more than ever, NetherRealm needs a lore master for the series. Someone who knows the series history inside and out and can sit the writers down when they go astray and say, no, this is not accurate to the canon. This is who Sindel is. Granted, even if her personality was totally in line with her actual character, the quality of the dialogue wouldn't do her any favours. I get that when you have to come up with over 400 intros across the whole cast, not all of them are going to be winners, but when Cassie's dialogue is making me draw comparisons to DMC Devil May Cry, something has gone horribly wrong. I genuinely hoped this was all made up as a prank to get me to make a fool of myself in a video so my friend could say, because some of these are so shockingly bad, borderline 14-year-old on DeviantArt levels of cringe, that until recently I genuinely believed these were fake. Now, if this personality was something they wanted to explore, there's no reason it couldn't have been used to make a brand new character. She could be the queen of another realm that Khan conquered in the millennia between the Edenia and Earthrealm conflicts. She betrayed her husband and married Khan willingly, but died sometime before the Earthrealm tournament cycle. Many unfavourable comparisons could be made to Sindel, which could get under her skin as she sees herself as a master manipulator and Khan's one and only. Another option would be to make this new backstory just Sindel's brainwashed persona. Make it that when Shang Tsung or Quan Chi messed with her mind to make her loyal to Khan, they made her believe she betrayed Jared as a way to suppress her hatred of Khan to keep her loyal. This is not a legitimate reading of the character as presented, by the way, as there is no evidence to support this idea, but it would be a hell of a lot better than this train wreck of a retcon. Weirdly, I find this entire characterization to be completely at odds with NetherRealm's much more progressively minded, very PC approach with MK11, particularly with the female characters. Despite going to such great lengths to present the women in a respectful manner, even going so far with it that they alienated a ton of their longtime fans to push this message they claim to believe in, they then turned Sindel into a very generic, negative stereotype of an older woman, an evil queen who cares only about her own comfort and pleasure, sluttily hitting on anything with a dick and siding with her main squeeze over her own child, despite the brainwashing having been retconned out of her story. I honestly don't know how anyone could honestly believe that this alien persona in any way fits the doting mother who desires to keep her daughter and subjects safe above all else. All we can do is try and get this message to NetherRealm. We need them to see that this characterization is completely wrong for Sindel and disrespects and disregards her entire 24-year history. With any luck, it's not too late for them to change it, to rewrite her intros and give us the real Sindel, not this utterly contemptible doppelganger of a once beloved character.